A reading from the Gospel according to Luke. And Jesus said, "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. The figs are not gathered from thorns, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of the heart produces good. An evil person out of evil treasure produces evil. For it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and then do not do what I tell you? I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, hears my words, and acts on them. That one is like a man building a house who dug deeply and laid a foundation on rock. When a flood arose, the river burst against that house but could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not act is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the river burst against it, immediately it fell, and great was the ruin of that house." The word of the Lord. Today, on this day, we remember and celebrate Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great, that I learned just the other day, of all of the English-born kings, and there have been a lot of English kings over the years, he is the only one that goes by the term the Great, which struck me as maybe this has something to do with why we remember him as a saint. Maybe that's why he gets to be known as the only English-born king that goes by the Great. One of the things I learned in studying about him is that it seemed like he was a great military leader during a time that the Anglo-Saxons were at bitter odds with the Danish Vikings and fighting for land and who would control the British Isles. And among the other kings around his time in the 800s going into the 900s, where a lot of times the kings failed to succeed against the Danish Vikings and lost a lot of land, Alfred seemed like he was a decently good military leader. It seemed like he rebuilt a lot. He protected his people. He valued education for his people. All good things. But when it comes down to it, the recurring theme I hear about Alfred, I read about Alfred, is that at every step in the way, he was very aware of how did he use his power and influence for the good of his subjects that were beneath him. He seemed to be very much shaped by the Christian idea that the power and influence he had over others was a gift that was given to him, not just for his own good, but for the good of those that he was charged with their care. Now, that doesn't mean that Alfred probably got it right all of the time. I'm sure there were times in his reign where he maybe didn't take care of his people as we would have thought fitting today in 2024. But it is a fascinating idea to stop and think to ourselves, are we mindful of how we use the power and influence that has been given to us in a way that benefits those that don't have that power and influence? Maybe you and I don't get to be kings, and we're certainly not the great kings, but we live in a world where there are people who listen to us, there are people who learn from us, people who follow what we're doing. We find ourselves in opportunities to teach and lead families and friends and coworkers, to be an example for others. We may even be in a position where we have employees that work for us or students that are learning from us in a school. But regardless of your circumstance, you have power and influence in this world in some capacity. And what I hear from Alfred the Great is that we could be mindful of, are we using that to help those that don't have that power and influence? It's frequently referred to as people who are less fortunate than us are referred to as the marginalized. And you know, what that term literally means is that they've been pushed out from the center of power and influence out onto the periphery, out onto the margins. And one Christian ideal is the idea of those of us in the center of a piece of power and influence, whatever that is in our world, have a responsibility to look to those who are at the margins and invite them to bring them into the center of power and influence. It doesn't mean we're pushing ourselves out. Alfred the Great certainly didn't abdicate being a king by caring for those that were less fortunate or beneath him. It didn't make him less powerful, but it was a way of using his power and influence to raise others up. And in that way, if that's how he decided to spend his life and his reign as king, I can certainly see why he's recognized as being Alfred the Great. And maybe in each of us, in our own little ways, if we're mindful of how we use our power and influence in our lives, we may be the great in our own little worlds and our own spheres. Amen.